Here to analyze the week in politics, the latest poll numbers, and the comings and goings on the trail 94 days out is former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, and I have to confess that listening to Hillary lie about lying is so breathtaking.
You lie about the lie about the lie. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean, Vince Shelley and I were talking about this a little while ago, and, part of the challenge of this campaign is that this is a campaign choice between certainty and uncertainty. Donald Trump is a businessman. He's never been president. So you can say there are uncertain things about him. He's learning the trade as he goes. But you have certainty with Hillary Clinton. She will lie. She is dishonest. She is corrupt. Her foreign policy is a disaster. She will appoint radicals to the Supreme Court. So in a sense, you have a certain disaster with Hillary, and you would be putting in the White House the most corrupt and the most openly dishonest person ever elected president. And that's pretty breathtaking.
I know that there was a lot of news this week about your criticisms of Donald Trump when he was involved in this little skirmishes. I personally think that this was made into a much bigger deal by the media, but his comments, he said he's not ready to endorse Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan has constantly been out there critical of him. John McCain, the same thing, and Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz and Jeb Bush. I think Trump's a little bit fed up with all of this, especially those people that made specific promises when they were running for the office themselves. And then, of course, with Mr. Khan, it got buried that he called Mr. Khan's son a hero. It got buried when Donald Trump said my refugee program would not have impacted the Khans, and it becomes, a bigger story because the media drives it that way.
Well, but okay, having grown up under Reagan and having campaigned in the 70s with Reagan and then in the 80s, real conservatives have to wake up every morning and understand that 80 to 90% of the elite media is your active enemy. They're not neutral. They're not unbiased. They're not fair. They're your opponents. And you have to then design a communication strategy which accepts them. It's a little bit like sailing. You're going right into a headwind, so you better tack because you're not going to make any ground going straight forward. And so you have to design what you say carefully, and you have to ask yourself every day, if I say X, how will they distort it? Because they're going to. And if I do anything to give them an edge, how will they exploit it? I think that Donald Trump has tremendous potential. I don't think he happened to accidentally win 37 primaries. I don't think he happened to accidentally get more votes than any Republican in history. But he's now in a totally different league where the left is in a frenzy to destroy him before he gets off the ground, and he's having to learn in public. And it's very difficult to learn in public when you're getting beaten up by the elite media. So I'm sympathetic with how big his challenge is, but I'm unsympathetic with the idea that in any way relieves him from the job of rising to the occasion. I mean, he is the only person standing between us and a Clinton presidency, and that is an enormous moral burden.
Yeah, I agree. And you have been one that has really praised his learning curve, and I think at every step you have sort of challenged him to reach deeper, to dig deeper and reach a little higher and grow a little bit more. And I think people took the criticism of you as, it was played everywhere, constantly, CNN and MSNBC. It was comments you made on the Fox Business Network. And even Newt Gingrich, a Trump supporter, slamming him. And I took it a little bit differently, maybe because I know you better, is that you're saying, hey, this is a moment. You got to step up. You got to get higher.
Right. I mean, what he's going to discover, and he's a volunteer,
And by the way, I got to tell a story here.
Okay.
There have been times in my career you have privately called me and warned me that you think I'm off course. True or false?
It's true, and sometimes I was right, but I wasn't always right. Sometimes you were more right than I was.
One example was you thought I was being too harsh on Obama in 07 and 08. You said you're really killing yourself here. You said I was out on a high wire without a net.
I spent the last 7 years saying over and over again, you were the one guy who actually understood how radical he was.
But I took what you said seriously because, number one, you're a friend, and number two, you're really smart, and I listen when my friends try and tell me something that I need to hear.
Well, and sometimes I say things directly in public to try to create an effect. But the frenzy, look, here's what's going on. The left is in a frenzy to intimidate Republicans to convince them that Donald Trump is a greater risk than Hillary Clinton. Now, I think for the country historically, Hillary Clinton is such a devastating risk. Her foreign policies were a disaster. Look at Libya, look at Syria, look at Iraq, look at Crimea, look at the fiasco of the Russian reset. Look what she almost did in Egypt. I mean, if the military hadn't taken over, Egypt today would be a radical country. Look at the fiasco of the Clinton-Obama $400 million. You know, a policeman was arrested in Washington, D.C., trying to give $200 to ISIS while the president is sending $400 million to the Iranian terrorist regime. Now, explain to me how that makes any sense.
Yeah, makes no sense.
You know, so from my perspective, while I get frustrated with Trump occasionally, I think he's got a lot to learn. I have zero doubt that for the future of this country, that a Trump victory is essential, because I believe Hillary Clinton would be the most corrupt and dishonest person ever to occupy the White House. And I think that her fantasy world of foreign policy would continue the disaster of the last 8 years. And people need to really back out and look at how bad Obama is in foreign policy and national security and realize how much he's done to undermine this country.
There's a guy from the Wall Street Journal, Bret Stevens, who attacked me yesterday because I have said that if Donald Trump loses, I am placing blame squarely on Republicans that are now actively sabotaging him and undermining him. And I was asked for a statement today, and I sent it over to somebody. I said, you know, I said he's a typical arrogant elitist who's incapable or seemingly incapable of understanding the plight of millions and millions of Americans in poverty, on food stamps, and out of the labor force. He's incapable of recognizing the danger of record debt and deficits and unfunded liabilities, incapable of recognizing the danger of open borders and refugees that are not properly vetted, incapable of understanding the danger in electing a president who refuses to say the words radical Islam, that supports the Iranian deal that gives the number one state sponsor of terror $150 billion and the right to move forward with their nuclear program, an elitist who refuses to recognize that weak, spineless, feckless, visionless Republicans who abandon every promise they ever made, every principle they ever espoused, helping to facilitate the entire Obama agenda. And then I finished and said he deserves Hillary's Supreme Court selections. He deserves the unvetted refugees living next door to him. He deserves the economy in decline that will continue. And he deserves the consequences of a foreign policy that's predicated on appeasement. Tell me if I'm wrong.
No,
I think
I almost wrote that as my newsletter today, because I got a note from a friend of mine who was piously expressing the difficulty he's having sticking with Trump. And I wrote back and I said, so let me get this right. Radicals on the Supreme Court, a disastrous foreign policy, corruption and dishonesty, the Clinton Foundation, 76 secret meetings in the Secretary of State's office with potential contributors, and 33,000 deleted emails. Those don't bother you. But Donald Trump being clumsy does. And I think that's what we've got to say to people, is that this double standard by which we're being told that there's something, you know, and again, I've been, as you pointed out earlier, I've been very tough with Trump. I'm not, you know, I don't automatically salute, but I'm tough with him in the context of trying to get him to victory, not in the context of trying to lose. And I believe any rational conservative who looks at how bad Hillary Clinton will be for the next 4 years can't possibly want her to win.
Well, then how do you explain? Well, then we've got to name names here. Then help me explain Paul Ryan. I know that Trump's expected to endorse him tonight. How do you explain Ted Cruz? How do you explain Jeb Bush and Lindsey Graham and John McCain? How do you explain, you know, because the message that I just sent out to this Wall Street Journal guy, you know, if she gets elected, they're allowing her to make Supreme Court selections. They're allowing open borders and refugees. They're allowing the economy to continue to decline. Why would they do that?
Well, first of all, in Ryan's case, he is voting for Trump. He was at the convention. He introduced Mike Pence for his acceptance speech. And while they have public policy arguments, I don't think there's any question that Paul Ryan's going to try to help carry Wisconsin and try to help carry a lot of other places. In the case of McCain, you know, there's been unnecessary bad blood on both sides of that relationship. Trump has said some stuff about McCain he should never have said, and McCain has always been pretty cheerful about having a chip on his shoulder, so he said some things back. But as you know, I endorsed McCain in a video this week, and I was very strong about it. I mean, John McCain is a legitimate, genuine American hero. The people of Arizona know him. He's going to get reelected, and he's a guy who's worked very hard for veterans and very hard for national security.
I'll be honest.
With him.
I'm very disappointed in John McCain. I'm very disappointed in all these other people. I just am. I feel like they're openly sabotaging.
There's plenty of disappointment on both sides. Okay, Trump is now the nominee. He is the leader of the party. Churchill once said, that in victory you have to be generous. He needs to bring the party back together. He is the leader. And getting involved in skirmishes doesn't serve him any good. It doesn't help defeat Hillary Clinton. My belief is the only two people that Donald Trump should ever talk about are Barack Obama, because he's got to make the case this is a failure, and Hillary Clinton, because he's got to make the case the future would be a failure. Every other irritation, every other comment, etc., ought to be like water off a duck's back. It doesn't matter. It weakens the chance of winning the presidency. I
agree 100% with what you're saying, and I have said it publicly.
Right,
100% agreement.
Having said that, the best way to get these other guys back committed and enthusiastic is to keep reminding them how really grotesque the alternative is. I mean, this whole story, which I know you've been covering, which I'm going to do a Facebook Live about later on this afternoon, which is going to be called Obama Lies Again. I mean, this whole story, my novel, Duplicity, had a scene towards the end where they were throwing money out of a helicopter to Somalian terrorists. And a friend of mine just wrote me a few minutes ago and said he never quite thought he would see that in reality. But you have an entire plane full. Think about this, a plane of unmarked small bills. I mean, this is like a scene from Lethal Weapon. And we now know from the hostages that they were told they would not leave until that plane landed. So for the president,
and they've even released a tape now. So it's everything the Iranians said is true. Everything Obama said is a lie. And by the way, even Susan Rice and John Kerry admitted money would go to terrorism.
Right. So, which is why it's goofy that we're prosecuting this cop who wanted to give $200, and we're allowing the president of the United States to give away $400 million in small bills. Oh. I mean, we just need to remind our side. You're going to get 4 more years of this stuff from Hillary. You have 4 more years of dishonesty, 4 more years of undermining America, 4 more years of failing to stand up to terrorism, 4 more years of placating the Iranians, 4 more years of undermining Israel. So that's what's at stake. And
right.
it is not a small
I
thing
agree.
to decide to accept that.
Really well said. Mr. Speaker, thank you. We appreciate it.